Welcome to Tiger Chainsaw Interviews. These exclusive interviews will give you a behind-the-scenes retrospective mixed in with some amazing secrets of your favorite games and franchises by the developers and creators of them. Now, if I have filmed the interview, you'll be able to watch it. Otherwise, it's a phone interview, so just sit back and relax. Now, I have done some incredible exclusive interviews with some amazing gaming legends in this community. So hit that sub button to make sure you don't miss any of those interviews. Alright, let's get to our interview of the day. My guest today is Brett Bibby, the man responsible for porting the arcade classic Paperboy to the Game Boy Color. Brett would open up his own game studio in Malaysia and develop quite a few different Game Boy Color games before moving on to Unity technology, which powers over 50% of the video games that we play today. Now, this is a special interview because Brett is going to be showcasing some of the source code and emulation type features of Paperboy on the Game Boy Color, so this is going to be a real behind-the-scenes treat for any programmers who are interested. Let's get this interview started. All right, so it looks like in 1999 was your first year in the video game industry, at least according to credits. Was Paperboy your first project, or was there one before that? And can you kind of share your journey into how you got into the video game industry?
I can. It's a little longer than a simple answer, but let's see how we do. I actually made my first game in 1979. It wasn't a very fun game. It was a text adventure that I wrote on a TI 99-4A. I had a TI 99-4A, an Atari 400, an 800, 1200 XL, Commodore 20, VIC 64, or VIC 20, Commodore 64. And I moved among all of those different games and all those different machines. Loved writing software, loved hardware, and ended up actually studying hardware engineering. Started out in that. After 2 years of electronic engineering, I actually did a small internship. And then I found out that engineering was kind of boring, back then anyway. I don't think the rise of the maker was really there yet. It was, but it wasn't. And So yeah, I sort of pivoted at some point into international business. And then I put myself through college designing games and working in the arcade industry, building games, things like that, part-time, repairing them, doing all that kind of thing. And then right out of college in January 1990, I went to Japan and worked with an IBM business partner, but I was writing games that whole time. But then I guess the first commercial, and we did a terrible job of credits. I actually have 30, probably around 40 games that I've made.
Wow.
And I made several before Paperboy. The one right before Paperboy was 720 Skateboarding, which is actually one of the more prouder games I'm more proud of. Before that was a company called Creative Talents. And we were making an Atari Jaguar game. And when Atari got killed by the PlayStation and the Saturn, we were one of the last games to be canceled. We were canceled in Halloween night of that year. But it was a game called Sudden Impact. So if you go onto Wikipedia, you can find Sudden Impact by Creative Talents. That was very close. And then before that, first commercial game, I guess, then for me would be Frantic Factory, the Virgin Interactive, also with I was Creative Talents, but yeah, I would say that my era of console development was clearly Game Brains, the studio I founded out of the ashes of Creative Talents, and Paperboy was our second game. 720 Skateboarding was our first.
The first one. Okay.
So
and we did a terrible job keeping credits updated. Like I can send you a list later of all the games, or maybe I can even do it so you can get a screen cap of it or something.
yeah, so I do have a question because when I was looking at the credits for Paperboy, you did the Game Boy Color one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it said, I think developed by Atari, but it was developed by your studio.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of confusing. So Paperboy started life actually as an
Arcade game, right?
Yeah, as an arcade game. Yeah. I'm just going to drop a list over here so that we got it later. Yeah, so it was a coin-op game. And because I was actually in coin-op or related to coin-op, I knew people at Midway.
Okay.
And so I called them up one day and said, hey, we're starting a new studio. And in order to bootstrap it, we're actually working on Game Boy titles because PlayStation was out, Saturn was out. Everybody wanted to move to 3D. And so it left kind of a hole on Game Boy. And then I wanted to start a new studio. And I thought, what better way to train people than to like teach them the like old school, low level games while everybody else moved away. So I called it Midway. They said, oh yeah, man, we'd love to have you do some games. We actually gave all the rights away. So then they connected me to Midway Home Entertainment, who was like managing that. And they had just like signed a deal literally a few weeks earlier with a company called Digital Eclipse. But what was good for me is because I had the relationship with Midway. They actually called Digital Eclipse, much to their chagrin, and said, hey, we're going to send this guy over, Brett, and you're going to let him have his pick of a couple of games. Cool. And so I actually picked the games that I wanted to do. And the first two I did were 720. Actually, we did 720, Paperboy, and Marble Madness. Those were like a pack of three, not pack, but we took all three and we bootstrapped our new studio with that.
Very cool. So you had actually played Paperboy before then in the arcade. You were familiar with it and you must have really liked it.
I did like it. I was terrible at it. I had a childhood friend who was better at it. And like every time he would play it, I would like, run over and play it. And we'd play, Marble Madness together. The Midway equipment was actually quite good. It was high resolution. And so these three games, the 720 skateboarding, the Marble Madness, and the Paperboy, were built on their sort of large screen, like more advanced hardware. So the graphics were actually really good for the time.
Yeah.
But they were really hard games to play.
So as the project manager and lead programmer, what were your daily duties for Paperboy? What were you doing day to day to make it come to life?
Right. So, I mean, that's what's in the credits. So I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff here in a while. But so my background is hardware engineering. I want to start a studio in Southeast Asia. There's nobody I can hire with any skill. So our strategy was, we'll start with like the very basics, like simple hardware. Game Boy built basically on a Z80 architecture. It had like 8 kilobytes of RAM, something like that. And it was 8 kilobytes of RAM, 4 megahertz, 8-bit, palette based, super, super low level assembly language is how you program it. And so we started there. So I basically had this little room. It was probably about the size of a bedroom. It was like maybe, 15 feet by 15 feet. I had one desk, and then I had 3 desks. I had another programmer and then 2 artists, and I had everybody's back to me so I could see their screens. And we had a 12-hour workday. We came in at 7:30 in the morning and we worked till 7:30 at night. And I just did tons of training. So it was like, we're going to build this game and I'm going to teach everybody here how hardware works. We're going to teach how games work. And that was how our studio actually got built. We literally like lots of training. So I did everything. I wrote the engine and taught everybody else how to program, how to do art. I hired a tools programmer. We made our own tools. So we made our own tile editors, our own sprite editors. We made our own music. We did everything. Just I think there were 6 of us. If I could share screen, I will start to show you some stuff, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me share my whole desktop, but then we're going to start with, so I actually found the original source code.
Wow.
So we've got the entire source repository here. And I somehow, by miracle, kept it all these years, maybe so that I could do this interview. And so this was the entire game. I've got a code editor open here, so I could show you stuff. And let me see, is it pretty small for you? Should I try and make this bigger?
I can see it fairly good.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, it's all in assembly language. I'll show you the actual source code. So I wrote probably 80-90% of all the code for this game. But this is it, super low level assembly language programming, the entire game. And what's more, I managed over the last couple of days to get the tools working. So I'm going to show you, we have the design doc, I have the original pitch that we did. And the big thing about these games was they have to fit on a cartridge. And so a lot of what we did was break down the game. And so we played the game. We had the original code from the arcade machine and the assembly and all the dumps from like long past era. And using all that, we pieced together every single thing. We figured out like how big things should be, calculated all its frames of animations for everything, and figured out that it will fit on a cartridge. And we do that by making like these sprite lists. So we, okay, we're going to have number of tiles. It's going to be 1 by 2, so 8 by 8. So this would be 8 by 16. And then, so narrow and tall. It's going to have 1 angle, 3 frames, can be killed, right? So we do these specifications, and then we literally take a calculator and we figure out, is this all going to fit crammed onto this cartridge? And we use like every byte that we can use. And And so then I actually managed to get the emulator working.
Oh, wow.
And this is our original tile editor. So we wrote this thing. I wonder, I don't want to crash it. Yep. So we wrote this tool. This is got a copyright of 1999. And got our address and studio in there. And then Eugene Ung, who was the guy I hired to do the tools. And you can see here in the tile window, you can see his name in here. So
yeah.
This tool, and then here I am. So these are the people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then these were my business partners. So I wrote all the engine, 90% of the code. Sam, I hired him and was training him. Kevin, same. So these are the 2 programmers, but Kevin also happened to have a degree in music, and he wrote all the music, the MIDI music, and he was skilled at it. And so he made all the music, and we output all of the bytes. And then I made this really simple sound music engine, and we actually made our own music player, which here it is in all assembly language.
Oh my gosh.
And that you could play from a table, and we had like sound tables as well as the music itself.
How long did all this take you?
We did this entire game, if I recall correctly, in about 9 months.
Wow.
Working 12 hours a day. We wrote all the tools, and the tools are still super popular, like Tile Buddy, Sprite Buddy, and MetaMapper were the 3 tools that we ultimately built in our studio. And in the Game Boy scene, they were quite popular. And so there's one. I can also show you. I managed to get the original tile set. And so when we built this game, GameBoy Color was just coming out. So this game works in both normal, and we actually added a mode so you can see it in black and white mode.
Cool.
As the color mode. And we had very limited colors, of course, but you can go through this thing and you can see the whole level. And we had some compression. So all these tiles, and this is all the tiles for the whole game over here. There wasn't that many. We had a 256 tile set. So you had to fit like all the words and all the tiles in there. We had 2 sets. And so we strip all this out. So on disk, it would be like a vertical level. And then we just move based on the row number. We know where to move it. But for authoring, we needed to do it this way so we could see everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was the last time that you looked at all this stuff before this interview? Had it been a while?
I haven't looked at this since 1999, I think.
Did it take you back, kind of going through all this stuff?
It took me back. Mostly what I love assembly language. I love the simplicity of every one of these instructions breaks into a cycle on the machine. There's no intermediate language. This is exact instruction. Like these words here correspond exactly to a machine level instruction. So there's no compiler. It's what's called an assembler. It basically just translates this into the byte code that runs the processor directly. And we build everything. And there's just so much beauty to this. And, people would say, yeah, like this is super hard, tedious to code, but I don't know. If you think in machines like we did, and most console developers do, like this is no problem to do all this stuff.
Now, you developed this in Malaysia, is that correct?
Yes. This
okay.
Our studio. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that area. What was where in Malaysia? What was it like during that era? You did answer some of my questions that I originally had, which was describe your desk to me, describe the studio to me. But talk to me about Malaysia. That's so unique that you developed it there.
Yeah, super, super unique. You may need to edit down the story, but it's a little easier with context. So, I'm a lifelong game maker, was in the arcade industry, really love that. In the 1980s, arcades were kind of going dark. They were not the place that you wanted to be. So that's when like that plus, lack of makers in engineering on the whole, I sort of pivoted I took this international business degree with a minor in Japanese. I went to Tokyo and I got a job with Kanebo, and they were an IBM business partner. And it wasn't games, but I was making games like at home every night and on the weekends. And I ended up traveling for them all over the world, but especially Southeast Asia. And I met a really wonderful guy named Randy Goki, who was in retail, and he was in Malaysia, and IBM was trying to sell them a system. And I ended up in a conference room across the table with the 2 Americans, one trying to kind of explain to the other, like the technical advantages to their company. And we became friends. And when I ultimately ended up moving to Singapore for a year. And when I left Singapore, he flew down and he was like, every time we meet, all you talk about is games. What do you really want to do? And we got kicked out of the hotel. We were on the side of a curb with a bottle of whiskey in Singapore in like 1993 or 4. And we were just sitting there and, I'm like, I love games, man. And so then, got drunk, hungover, went back to Tokyo. And then like 2 days later, the phone rings, not really email, internet, not really there. Like literally the phone rings, pick it up. It's him. And he's like, come to Malaysia. We're going to build a studio together and make games. And then you can help me with your IBM side, like, you support me on this part and we'll let you, we'll build a little studio. And so I quit and I ended up flying to Malaysia. I think I got there in like November of 93, I want to say, somewhere there. And then, we started making, ended up like thinking about some games. I made Frantic Factory with Virgin Interactive. That was our first game. And then started making Sudden Impact with Atari. So we had designed some games and some tech on that platform. They canceled the title. We ended up suing them, and it took our little studio down. I mean, we were just a couple of people, right? But out of that, we then started Game Brains, and the story from the top of this, which is contacted Midway and got some titles going. And so that's the backdrop. And so why Malaysia? So Malaysia's a really cool place. You have like really talented people, but they just didn't have that skill to build these games. Salaries were lower, so we could afford to invest in every, the people and help develop them. And it was just a lot of fun. I love living there. I love the food. I love the culture. I want to stay. I can get us some projects to work on. We can do the projects entirely ourselves. And so it was great. It was just a great place to invest and to build this technical company.
You're quite the world traveler. I'm pretty jealous of all the places that you've already been, Malaysia, Tokyo, now you're in Copenhagen. It's pretty cool to see you just all over the place.
Yeah.
So I'm going to combine two questions together here. Was the development of Paperboy for the Game Boy Color a smooth process, or were there any difficulties during it? And then you also mentioned that it was one of the first hybrid IIRC. I don't know what that means. So can you explain to me what that is?
I said it was the first hybrid IIRC.
Let me look. I thought I had it up here. Going through my emails.
Oh, maybe it was just
it was one of the first hybrid games IIRC.
Oh, if I recall correctly. Sorry. That's
an acronym.
Hybrid was Game Boy and Game Boy Color.
Gotcha.
So, right. So, it was smooth. I know hardware. I love hardware. I love assembly language programming. I get paid to rewrite one of my favorite arcade games of all time, like not of all time. I mean, I wasn't great at it, as I said earlier, but I grew up with these like games, and I was like a kid at that time, and like, oh man, like I wonder who makes these games. I wonder how, and then to like be in a place years later to be actually able to like work with this game and the original, code from the original arcade machine, and extract that out, to hire a couple of people to build tools. So we built all of our own tools. We had nothing. So, right, to build like these art tools, to build these sound tools, to build this music engine, to build the tile engine and all the other stuff. I mean, it was just, I don't know. Yeah, I guess there was problems, but like that was fun, right? Those are fun to have.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
I got 3 questions left for you. This is my favorite question to ask. I ask it to everyone because of the unique answers that I get. But what's that one memory that you will never forget when you think back of developing Paperboy? It can be something funny. It can be something serious. It can be just a vivid memory or feeling that you will never forget when you think back on that time.
Well, I guess it's really like it's a general memory. It's not a specific one. I've got specific ones on maybe some other games, but like this one was like, we're in this really crappy office. I mean, it's really crappy. I think our rent was, I don't know. It was probably $100 or $200 a month or something. It was in a building that was known for prostitutes, like there was like apartments above, there was like some simple like shopping and a couple of noodle places below. And I remember just sitting in that room because I could see everyone's screen and just like, they don't know anything. And we're like trying to build something from nothing. And just like every morning getting our coffee, coming in, we did like probably 2-3 hours of teaching a day. And then, like, it's just because nobody knows anything, you've got to teach everything to everyone. There was no networking. We had no network. We had no internet. We had these PCs that we built, like 4 of them, 5 of them. And, so like we had to integrate, like people would take a floppy disk, they copy their code, and like even text editors, like this is just an era where you just didn't have advanced tools. And so, we'd use like literally like Notepad or some editor like DOS. We were running in DOS much of the time. And just like to copy, to like open somebody's file, and they'd worked on some little routine, and you have to like copy those bytes in and like do, and then compile and try to get it running again. Like it was just like, stone tools, the feeling of like cavemen, right? Just trying to make this thing run. And then the hardware, it's got all these cables and they all got to plug in a certain way. And it's really slow, and you have to like press a lot of buttons and click a lot of things until finally you can see it works. And then you're like, okay, great. So it's just more the general memories of like starting something new in this like really crappy building with crappy gear. And like, we didn't have any budget for renovations. It was like the original carpet. And I think we had like a few desks that my partner donated from his office that weren't being used. So like our furniture was just an eclectic mix, like nothing matched. It was just really, really bootstrap,
Simpler times.
Simpler times, yeah. But I'll give you a memory. I know it's not Paperboy, but it was a game that we did just before Paperboy, which is truly our first game, called 720 Skateboarding. And that one, the one that it has actually, it's not the right word, but let's call it a physics engine. And so it's a 2D tile map game. It's got this little tiny sprite skateboarder. And if you press the button and it pushes, and you can hit a curb, and it will go up the curb as 2 pixels, but you could go up the curb, and then it would go down the curb and go back the other way. And so like pixel precise, on a Game Boy like getting that working was like a memory. I remember sitting there. It was late at night. It was super hot. There's no air conditioning. I'm sweating. If you open the windows and mosquitoes fly in, right?
Wow.
In Southeast Asia, and like to get that working. And so there were those moments, right? There are those moments where you don't know if it's going to work or not, or whatever. But yeah, sorry, this is a bit generalized, but that was the memories I have.
I feel like a lot of people that I've spoken to in the game industry, they always have that moment where they're like, is this going to be worth it? Is this actually going to work? Is this just all for nothing? It's interesting to hear that there is a lot of self-doubt sometimes. And a lot of times it turns out to be, a big hit or a success. So it's just funny to hear that lots of people have those doubts every now and then.
Over 30 years, I had many times where I thought all was lost, or there was a bug or something, or, like it definitely happens. I mean, you're trying to make something at the limits of what the hardware can do. And yet it's got to be fun. And the fun is hard to find. And there's no tools, like, especially in the old days, right? It was very difficult to know whether it's going to be fun. And so you could spend so many hours writing code and then find out it's just not fun,
Yeah. All right. 2 questions left for you. This is an easy one, maybe. What was your favorite or maybe least favorite obstacle or enemy in Paperboy?
Oh, that's a good. I haven't played this game in so long. It was.
I was looking at the code that you had. I didn't know that there was a drunk in there.
Yeah, there's a drunk in there. He walks down the sidewalk, and then there's cars that come, and then sometimes they suddenly back up.
Yeah.
And I think the ones that I didn't like was I think there was a manhole cover that could pop up in front of you. I don't think I liked that one very well. And you'd run out of papers, you'd break windows, the dogs would chase you. It was a really hard game. It was hard to play at the arcade. It was really hard to play on a Game Boy as well, right? It has this tiny little screen, and I don't know, it's like 160 by 144 pixel screen, right? It's just like,
Okay. All right. So final question. What are you up to now? Are you still in the game industry? Are you doing something different? Are you traveling the world? What are you up to?
Well, I don't know, so let me do a couple of things. Let me show you the game list first. Let me show you what we worked on.
Cool.
So this is all the games that we made in order. A lot of console titles. So this was Creative Talents. These were the first two. And then when we bootstrapped, the new studio was here. So this was 720 Paperboy. So we made these two, but then Marble Madness right after that. And then we made all of these Game Boy Colors, Game Boy Advance, and we jumped onto consoles. So the team was doing really well. We did we had PlayStation 2. We did GameCube. We did actually some N64, GameCube, and Wii U. I don't know that they're all listed on here. But these are, yeah. So we did this over, like, the studio was 98. So from 98 to basically 2011, we did, what is that, 39?
Wow.
Console type. Well, no, not all consoles, some web stuff, some smaller web stuff in here, just for fun and other things. So did that. And then what happened on the back of that is I got to know the founders of Unity and started helping them out in Asia because I was well established out there. And then I actually took over engineering. So I ran engineering at Unity Technologies, which I don't know if you know, is powering more than half of all video games on Earth on all platforms. So
big deal.
Led engineering for them, worked for Unity for 10 years. And I just finished up with them end of April this year.
Wow.
And actually, my wife and I, is also a long-term game developer, and she joined our studio. She was getting she was studying her CPA exam during the time we made Paperboy. And then she was a certified public accountant. And then she joined as our finance person, became our chief financial officer. And together we built the studio, and she was a lifelong game dev as well.
Wow.
And she then was a producer on with IO at Hitman here in Copenhagen. And then now together we're working on a new game.
Are?
Yes, we are. It's in pre-production, but we're working on, as we always do, very similar to Paperboy, working on a game. Working on tools that support the game, and those tools will likely maybe also make available to other people. And then we're making a technology platform that in order to make the tools. So working on lots of cool stuff at the moment. Yeah.
So in pre-production, feel free to just say, no, I'm not going to say anything. Do you have like a title for the game, or do you have like a genre for the game?
We do. One of the questions we've been batting around for years is like, what is Star Wars for Gen Z? Like we keep thinking about like what is that? And we kind of feel we have two Gen Z daughters, teenage daughters, and so we see how much they really like characters and character development. So we're making a very character heavy science fiction game that is a bit of an open world sandbox, but it's really about characters and their interactions. So like lots of characters on screen doing interesting things together.
Okay, all right. Any idea when it could potentially be released or anything like that?
It might end up being, the answer may end up being never, but it's right now it's you know it's a passion project that we're working on. And then, like I said, we've kind of fallen into the tools. So I think likely what we're going to end up doing is releasing a character creation tool first, and then using that to power our game. But we'll see.
Cool.
We'll see. We're not, and we're semi-retired, so like it's not a do or die. It's not a money or funding or time issue. It's just like
it's passion.
Yeah, follow your bliss, and that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Brett, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you discussing Paperboy, showing the code and all that stuff. Is really cool to see. I know the audience is going to get a big kick out of that, and just sharing your memories of that era. So thanks so much for today.
Well, thank you, Seth. I mean, just the fact that you reached out, and I started digging around my hard drives and uncovering all this early stuff. It's quite fun. It does bring back a lot of really great memories, and makes me think I want to start assembly language programming.
So that was my interview with Brett Bibby, the man responsible for getting Paperboy to the Game Boy Color. What did you learn today in today's interview? Did you think that the source code and the other things that Brett showed off on his screen was pretty cool? I know I did. I learned a lot from him, and I also enjoyed his stories about being in Malaysia and teaching others the power of programming. If you haven't yet, like this video and subscribe to my channel to watch plenty of other video game interviews done with exclusive game creators, programmers, developers, and writers right here on this channel. Thanks for watching.